Haps TV, and I'm honored to be joined by Zevin Schuster. He is a junior at Hofstra University. He's a journalist there who was the Long Island Press Club first place award winner for student journalism for something he did last year. He's also the host of the Good Take podcast with Alex Hutton and Zevin Schuster. And you may be thinking, wait a second, another Schuster? Yes, full disclosure, Zevin is my nephew. Zevin, great to be with you. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. You know, two Schusters is always better than one.
Indeed. We're going to cause a lot of trouble, I think, over the next little while. And by the way, for anybody who wants to be part of the conversation, you can weigh in on Twitter or through Haps. We're already getting hellos from Ellie Hoffman and Pablo De La Hoya. Zevin, one of the reasons I want to talk to you is because on Cricket's News, we've been talking a lot about college campuses and a number of universities that are sending students home. What's the situation in terms of how are things going for you and your other students at Hofstra?
So things are obviously it's a lot different. It's been a huge adjustment. You know, we have to wear a mask whenever we leave our dorm. You know, pretty much unless we're eating. You know, we have to be covered up. You know, half the chairs in our classrooms are wrapped up in garbage bags. Like we're not allowed to do a bunch of things. Now kids are still going out to there's still partying going on. Like kids are still up to activity. Like that's pretty expected. I know Hofstra said that they've heard 34 cases. They've reported or found 34 cases. I've honestly compared it to, you know, like when people say back in the day in Major League Baseball that, you know, they tested some people for drugs, but like everyone's kind of doing it. They just didn't find out about all of it. That's kind of what I would compare it to. Like the amount of cases that have been reported is not actually what reflects reality. But I think
is there a threshold? Is there a threshold at Hofstra in terms of if they get to a certain number, which they would essentially close down all the in-person learning and have everybody remote?
Yeah, so it's either 5% of the campus, which is like 9 or 10,000, or it's 100 people. I don't know which number is larger. So there's been conflicting numbers. Like Cuomo said something, then like the Ministry of Health, so-and-so association, whatever, said something else. Then the university sent out an email to all of us saying like a different thing. So, dude, I barely got D's in high school. I suck at science. Like who knows?
Spoken like a true Schuster. Zevin, I got to ask you. So there's been a lot of, on Cricket's News, which is the daily show we come out with each day at 5 o'clock. And Zevin, I think, is going to be a contributor to that before he knows it. Zevin, we've done some stories about how some universities have put enormous pressure on their students to rat out students. That if you see somebody who's violating the social distancing or not wearing masks, that you should report them. Is there that same pressure at Hofstra, and how are students dealing with it?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So it's funny that you asked that because they actually just sent out an email today from the headmaster saying, you know, they set up like an anonymous place to write out so you don't have to suffer the consequences. Like I know for me, and I'm going to be honest, like, you know, these are 18 to 22 year olds, you know, that you're talking about here. There's a lot of, you know, peer pressure is a lot more effective versus when you're old and you have a bald spot, you just care a lot less.
Careful there.
I was more talking about my father, but you know,
we have a non-aggression pact in this family, Zevin, just so you know. Anyway, keep going.
But no, like, you know, people my age are a lot more likely to, you know, take peer pressure into account than people are your age. And so, yeah, I mean, I know there is hesitation. And that said, at least from the people I talk to, the sense I get is there's, you know, obviously people's lives are at stake, but also people's education is in the balance. No one wants to go home. And so if someone's going to, you know, if someone could potentially cost them and make them have to move home and take the semester from home, they don't want their education to be messed with. So I think there's still some peer pressure, but compared to most times, I guess, there's definitely a lot more of a willingness to rat each other out, which is kind of nice to see.
We're talking with Zevin Schuster. He's a junior at Hofstra University, an award-winning journalism student there, awarded by the Long Island Press Club. Yeah, you'll notice the name Schuster. He is my nephew, but he's also a hell of a journalist. Zevin, I got to ask you because...
don't go that far.
I got to ask you because, I mean, daily life for students, you have some classes that you actually go to and attend. Then you have some classes that you're doing remote. Some of the activities you were doing, working for WRHU, the Chronicle, some of the journalism activities, how have those changed because of COVID? I mean, what limitations are on you?
Sure. So let's start with the radio station with WRHU. Stands for We're Radio, Hofstra University. You should all download the app, listen to it. I'll give them a quick little plug. So first off, the way it's changed is we are no longer allowed to just go into the station and schmooze whenever we want. That's out the window. So that's bummer number one. And then look, I will say, I mean, I'm sure you know this. I mean, out of all the industries that have been affected by COVID and going remote, probably the broadcast industry has had one of the easier times. I mean, it's a bit of a pain, but it's easier to do remote than a lot of other things. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty much everything is over Zoom. Kind of nothing earth shattering, I would say, but it's certainly been an adjustment. I will say, having sort of gotten used to it at the end of last semester has made the transition.
Now you're a beat reporter. You cover sports, and Hofstra University doesn't have any sports. So, I mean, do they make arrangements for journalism students and for others when your assignments have changed to sort of give you something else to try to keep going?
Well, so I mean, it's complicated. So I know, like right now, so I'm in the sports and the news department at my station, but so the news is kind of going along as it was. Just there's like a daily news show, kind of like you guys do, and that's obviously done on the Slack app, which I will say is quite much better than GroupMe, which we used to use. So that's and then for sports, we used to be able to sign up for whatever show that we wanted, for whatever. We can basically do whatever our hearts desired, as they say. And now they're basically limiting us to one show, so all the new people can get stuff. Because they can't have people going into studio. They have to wash things between every show with the sanitizer, wipes, whatever. So there's just a lot more limitations. Like I mentioned to you the other day that they're still figuring out things like morning show. They're still figuring out things like election night. I mean, obviously everyone wants to be a part of that, and there's a whole. I mean, there's so many things to figure out purely just from the coverage. I mean, you would know that as well as anyone. And that's before you even take into account like the distancing and the safety. So there's just many things to take into consideration.
Now let's do a hypothetical here, because it's actually been a real scenario at James Madison, North Carolina State, Cal State, Chico, in which they had so many COVID outbreaks that they decided, okay, we have to shut down the campus. But what they decided at some of those universities is to actually send the students home, even if they're asymptomatic, to not keep anybody on campus for 14 days. And a number of health experts have suggested, well, you're simply transporting the problem directly to people's families and communities. Is there a plan at Hofstra if in case they feel like they have to shut down classes? Is there an arrangement there to keep students there, to at least isolate them and have some sort of backup plan rather than sending everybody home?
That is a great question. And I will say, it's been well documented that the older people are more prone to this disease. And so obviously, sending this disease home to the people who could be most affected by it doesn't seem like the smartest thing to do. As far as Hofstra's backup plan, it doesn't mean that they don't have one. Personally, I have zero clue. Again,
okay, fair enough.
I don't know. Yeah.
By the way, we got the hellos to you, Zevin, from Brett Walker. Hello from Los Angeles. Beth Searle says hello. Chris Trent, hello from New York. And so for everybody who's watching us via Haps TV, live on our YouTube channel through Quick Hits News and all the rest, good to have you on board. You can always ask questions of Zevin Schuster or myself. We'll probably not get into too much family history, but we'll wait and see. Zevin, the podcast that you have, it's called the Good Take Podcast with Alex Hutton and Zevin Schuster.
Yes.
I want to ask you a little bit about that, because this is one of these very rare days in sports where you have the four major leagues all playing on the same day. The National Football League tonight, the NBA playoffs, Major League Baseball's about halfway through, National Hockey League. Which of these sort of sports have you been following, and what sort of storylines jump out to you?
Guys, so that's a great question. So usually in normal times, there's usually 1 or 2 days a year when all four sports play at the same time. I mean, usually, because football's only this time of the year, and then basketball and hockey are always in the fall, and baseball kind of goes into the fall. It's usually around like in October, November, when there's like the one day of the year where everything's happening. But to actually have like NBA playoff games, not just like the first week of the season, but to have like the biggest games of the season also during football is unprecedented. Probably the only time that'll ever happen. And look, it's unavoidable. And some people, I saw someone in the comments would be like, "Oh, Trump 2020." So these people are going to get triggered by me saying this. But look, the biggest storylines right now are the protests and the boycott. Like that's just what it is. Sure, you have guys like LeBron who could potentially pass Jordan with another title. Like there's all those titles, but there's all those storylines. But I mean, athletes boycotting in the middle of a pandemic in a bubble like already is huge news. Also, gosh, I mean, even tonight, I'm sure you didn't see, but the Chiefs and the Texans, they locked arms before the game as like a show of unity. It wasn't during the anthem. They weren't kneeling. They just locked arms as a show of unity, like nothing controversial. And most of the fans in the stadium, again, this is the Chiefs' home stadium. They just put up the Super Bowl banner. So this is like the glorious night. You just want, things should be happy and fun, right? Super Bowl champions hung up the banner and the locking arms for unity, and I kid you not, at least 70 or 80% of the fans booed.
Wow.
You just hung up the banner. There's a lock of arms for unity. It's not even during the anthem, which, again, it was even about the anthem. Like, I don't know. But again, Super Bowl banner, you're locking arms in the protest, for unity, and they're still booing. Like,
all right, so Zevin, let's put on your analyst hat here. What do you make of what's driving the fans of the Kansas City Chiefs? And granted, they had to socially distance, I assume, in the stands, and limited numbers were allowed in. What drives the fans to boo their own players who are locking arms with the opposing players to sort of show solidarity? Why would fans do that?
Sure. So that's a great question. And so I will say personally, like, I do disagree with them doing that. I think that there's a common, we always hear the stick to sports thing, and I could go on for a really long spiel about that. I think, there's an old-fashioned mindset that, politics should be left out of sports. And I guess where I would disagree is that locking arms in unity just doesn't seem like that political. I mean, you could honestly make that about anything. You could say we're locking arms because we love, like, chocolate chip ice cream. Like, we can lock arms for anything. And so, obviously with the last 6 months, like, people know what's behind it. And so I think, that there's I don't mean to generalize, but it does seem like there's a bit of a, when I was their age, like, it didn't used to be this way, and, like, not on my lawn, and they make millions of dollars. I mean, there was a big story today. You probably didn't see it, but one of the more famous commentators, this guy named Skip Bayless, he's a big Dallas Cowboys, and I don't know if you saw, but the Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott, he came out, did an interview, and opened up how he went through a lot of mental health challenges in the offseason. His mother passed away, his brother committed suicide, and he was stuck in quarantine to just, sick to himself, which was hard enough for me and the rest of us. But I didn't have a brother and a mother who passed away, thank God. And Skip Bayless was like, why did he do that? It's going to cost the Cowboys. It's going to cost his team. It's going to cost them wins. The players are going to talk trash to him. So again, there's a lot of, to me, I always go back to a saying, it's much easier to fool someone than it is to convince them that they were fooled. And so it's really hard to change these long had mindsets, I think.
Well, that's such an interesting point, because for so long, and I'd say this goes back to, for example, when I was your age 30-some years ago, I mean, sports was the athletes, the sole goal was to focus on the locker room. Don't do anything that would distract from team unity, from team focus. And so as a result, players' personal problems were not discussed, whether it was drinking or whether it was marital problems or deaths. I mean, that was sort of pushed aside, because the idea was, well, you want the locker room to be solely focused. This day and age, people who are your peers, just a few years older than you, they have a better appreciation perhaps for their own sort of inner demons, their own feelings, and are certainly more open to talking about it. And I guess the argument becomes, well, does that detract from a locker room or not? And I think it sounds like you're saying there's an argument that actually being more transparent about your feelings can actually make a team closer.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, I think so. Like, you'll hear a lot of people, say, if you want to bring up Kaepernick, which I know is a hot button thing, there's so many, and dude, like, the dude's not perfect. There's plenty of things to criticize about him. But one of the common bullshit ways that people kind of undercut him, they say, oh, he's a distraction. He's a huge distraction. Listen, like, I grew up in the Bay Area. Like, Dad and I are huge Niners fans. You can go read quotes from his teammates, from his coach. They all said it wasn't a distraction at all. It brought our teammates closer. He was actually voted. He was given what's called the Len Eshmon Award, which is given to the most courageous and inspirational player. And it's voted on by his teammates. And so I'm just going to guess, Dave, you have worked at MSNBC, a lot of different places. You would not give an employee of the month to someone who's a big selfish distraction. Yes or no?
You're absolutely right. And I've worked with people, unfortunately, who were selfish distractions, and it was ruined the newsroom.
Exactly. We don't have to name any names, but we don't name any names, even though I can think of two in the back of my head.
We won't go there. We're talking with Zevin Schuster. He's a junior at Hofstra University, an award-winning, got the Long Island Press Club Award, first place award for journalism for student journalism last year. Zevin, I want to give you some regards to people who are showing up on our feed. Donna Brewer says hello from San Jose. Peter Bittner says hello from Seattle. Susan Klein, hello from Bloomington, Indiana. Great show, Shoe and Shoe. Thank you, Susan. We've got a question from Alicia Riggs. She says, are you concerned, and this gets back to where we started the broadcast, are you concerned about the students who reside at Hofstra, but who are going out to parties?
Did you mean who are not going to parties?
No,
But
she
who
says who are going to parties. The students who are defying
are going to parties?
protocols, who are violating. Does
Yeah.
that, I guess personally, does it worry you?
Oh, that's a good question. Honestly, I mean, I worry for them because I don't want anything to happen to them or their families. For me personally, I can control like what I do, who I hang out with, where I go. I mean, now look, it would be ideal, but I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, I'll hang out with like friends, like socially distanced. I'll go get my sushi fix. I'll go watch whatever I need to watch. Do my work, and then there's not, I'm taking care of myself. So I don't mean that I don't mean for that to sound selfish at all, but.
Well, Zevin, is it hard to sit in classes where you have the mask on, or to walk around campus with the mask? I mean, do you get used to it, or I mean, is it strange? Is it?
Oh yeah. Oh, it's so bizarre. I mean, it's honestly, my teacher said the other day, it's like, gosh, like some of you, I don't even know like what your smiles look like. I don't even know, like I haven't even seen like your face. And so it's definitely weird. I mean, sitting again, pretty much unless you're in your room or you're eating, yeah, you have to wear it at all times. And so it's, you can see it out of your, eye line or eyesight. So it's very weird. It's just, these are things that it just, I don't know. If you would have told me or anyone this, a year, however long, would have said this is like cuckoo land. So.
Well, I want to ask you about that. And again, we're talking with Zevin Schuster live over Hofstra TV. This is a streaming platform that enables us to communicate live and broadcast, live stream it on all sorts of different platforms. This is also a special edition of Quick Hits News. We are partnered with Hofstra TV, and we have a daily show that comes out each day at 5 o'clock. Zevin, there was just a Pew Research survey that came out, I think just today, which found something like 52% of everybody aged 18 to 29 is now living at home with their parents. This is the highest percentage the survey has ever recorded, even higher than the Great Depression. The impact, of course, on COVID is that has caused so many people, your cohorts, to have to live at home for financial reasons, economic reasons, because it's safer. But what sort of impact do you think that has on your sort of cohorts, your generation, to have to deal with something like a pandemic and all the consequences?
I mean, there's so many. I do want to mention. Sorry, you froze for a second. I do want to mention. So the Pew Research poll I did see, which I think is important to point out. I also want to point out there was a similar poll from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, that roughly 1 in 4 young adults between the ages of 18 and 24 have reported not only like bad mental health, but like they've reported seriously contemplating suicide. Again, 25% of young adults. So I want to put that out there too.
Yeah.
You said, how is it affecting us? I mean, I don't even know where to begin. I mean, there's so much stress and anxiety for juniors, seniors who are about to leave school. I also want to point out too. I mean, you have a handful of kids who graduated college in 2008 when that happened. 5 to 10 years of just starting to get on their feet, build some wealth, and then now they're probably not high enough yet where they can survive something like this, so they get knocked down again. It's really unspeakable, mentally, emotionally, materialistically, the ways that this is going to set people back for so many years. It is really no way to even put it into words, honestly.
And Zevin, I want to add something that's going on that's also big in the news in your home state of California, particularly Northern California. There are more than 200 fires that are burning, more than 2.5 million acres. The skies over San Francisco, Sacramento, literally turning orange or blood red. What goes through your mind when you hear? I mean, look, growing up in California, obviously you're used to wildfires and earthquakes and everything. But when you look up and you see the news, and you're a journalism student, so you've got to pay attention to it. What goes through your mind when you see what's happening in your home state?
No, it's crazy. I mean, I was talking to a couple of my friends from the Bay Area last night for my birthday, and so I saw a couple of pictures. It's pretty insane. There's been pictures taken of outside the San Francisco Giants stadium, and it's literally, I was like, yo, this is like the color of their team's jersey. Like, this is like a bizarro world. The Giants are orange. So it's really scary, and it's kind of weird to not be there. It's kind of I know they've always told me when I was growing up that to expect the big one, as in the big earthquake. And so I don't know, part of me wants to be there when my place is going through a hard time. Sort of like when I'm sure with you, like when your kids something bad goes wrong, you want to be there for them. It's probably not exactly the same thing, but so it's a little sad. Yeah.
Do you ever think of bigger picture or draw sort of bigger picture? I mean, obviously the focus for all of us, get through day by day, get through COVID-19, get through whatever economic difficulties we're facing, get through the fires in California. But a lot of people like to sort of think bigger picture. Well, oh my goodness, how many years is COVID-19 going to set back the United States economically? Is it going to wipe out an entire generation's opportunity, like your generation? What's happening with global warming? Is global warming somehow related to why the fires are getting worse in California? Do you and your fellow students think about sort of the bigger picture much, or are you really just sort of focused on sort of the day-to-day?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. Honestly, there's a lot of both. I think once I will focus on the long term, and then once I focus too much on the long term, and I'm just like, oh my god, then I'm like, okay, just get through today, push that, worry about that later. So I think, there's obviously a healthy amount to, balancing out and having, feeling some of both. But sure, I mean that. You would have to be a fool to me to not at least be aware of and to be contemplating, global warming for decades to come, financial hardships for decades to come. Like we mentioned, mental health, again, like financial hardships. Again, like there's so much that's a clusterfuck right now that there's no way. I think you can walk and chew gum at the same time, and you can really take both into account. So I know that's a cloud answer, but.
No, I mean, I hear you. And I think, Zevin, because of, both how you speak about it and how so many of your fellow students speak about it, it certainly gives a lot of us who feel guilty about the world that we're sort of giving to your generation, which is messed up in so many ways, that perhaps if there's any generation that will be able to fix it, it would be yours, just because of how creative and industrious and focused, and I think also progressive so many of you are. I want to turn it back to some good news, and we're talking with Zevin Schuster. The podcast is Good Take with Alex Hutton and Zevin Schuster. Good take on sports and all sorts of other stuff. So, Zevin, we mentioned 4 different leagues that are playing today. Major League Baseball is about halfway through the season, about 43, 44 games for most teams. The Oakland A's, they're in first place. Are you surprised? What do you make of Major League Baseball, and how's the season going?
Yeah, so it's been a wild ride. Obviously, I'm very happy with the A's. A little bit surprised, but listen. I'm excited. I don't care if we can win the World Series. I don't care if it comes in a 60-game season, in a 2-game season. I will take it however it comes. So that's been great. As far as the league as a whole, it's been, there's started off with the Marlins. They had a bunch of positive tests a while back. The A's had one, the Cardinals had one. So it's been disorganized. I'm glad that they're putting a product out on the field at all. I think a lot of us this year, whether it's sports or otherwise, have just adjusted our expectations to, as long as it's happening, it's fine. Like I'm not really holding them to a high standard. There's certain rule changes. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, are you surprised, Zevin, that the baseball's made it this far? Because I guess early on in the first week, it looked like baseball may not, make it past, the first week.
Oh, I a couple a week and a half, week 10 days. I mean, I certainly didn't think they were going to get this far. And honestly, I mean, there's still no guarantee that they're going to crown a World Series champion. So.
Yeah. A couple more questions coming in through live Haps
Sure.
TV. And again, thanks to everybody at Haps TV for this, helping us with the live broadcast, and also all my colleagues at Quick Hits News. You can follow us at Quick Hits TV on Twitter. You can follow Zevin Schuster at ZShoesT9. And you can also get, do I have that right? Do I get the Twitter right?
ZShoes9. I know it's not easiest to say.
ZShoes9. Okay. You've also.
So I wasn't thinking.
Also, the podcast, Good Take with Alex Hutton and Zevin Schuster. So Alicia Riggs, and this gets back again. Zevin's a student journalism student at Hofstra University. I'm not sure you have the answer to this, Zevin, but Alicia asked, there's been a lot of media coverage and debate about the number of cases that Hofstra has. Is 74 accurate?
By the official count, possibly. So Hofstra, they have like these two things where there was a certain number of cases that they have reported before August 28th, which is when I guess people started moving in, or when classes started or something. So there's that, and then there's like post 28th. So they're kind of differentiating those, because supposedly the people who got tested positive on the 28th were isolated for long enough or were kicked out, and so they don't feature or picture, or like they don't matter in this batch. Again, there's more cases than are being reported. I know I have a friend in the Chronicle who wrote a story a couple of days ago saying that there were 34, but like the day before that there was like 13. So I know they're on the increase, and I know that there's more than I know there's more cases that have been reported. But again, there's more baseball players, like I said, taking drugs than who test positive for it. So again, there's no way to cracked down all the time. And I know that they're testing randomly as much as they can. So
we have a question related to masks. Brett Walker writes, there's a Japanese supermarket that is making their employees put pictures of their faces on top of their masks. Have you seen any creativity around the campus at Hofstra of people, what they're doing with their masks, or is it just pretty straightforward?
That makes you want to eat sushi even more. I'm assuming it's a sushi place. That makes you want to eat sushi even more. No, that seems like a lovely idea. I would say I've not seen that, but it's honestly, it seems, it's nice to like look at people and not have to talk to them like this. It's really nice. So I honestly, I hadn't thought of it. I think that's a wonderful idea.
Zevin, is there much optimism on campus at Hofstra that eventually, Long Island's been doing pretty well compared to the rest of the nation for the last couple of months. Much optimism about how the semester is going to go at Hofstra?
How the semester is going to go? Like we're going to stay on campus, or
whether you're going to stay on campus and be able to actually stay on campus when so many other universities are having to shut down and send their students home, and also maybe optimism that there'll come a point where everybody gets the vaccine and you can finally take off those masks and do what college students do.
I know. We'll take off the mask and throw them like what are the hats called at graduation?
Oh, the Navy caps that they flip off.
Yeah, we take the mask off and chuck it in the air. That'll be fun. No, I mean, honestly, my roommate and I, we've been like, man, we've joked around that, man, we're gonna enjoy every night here because we don't think we're gonna stay here. I've certainly heard more like stories of kids partying. I know, like for example, athletes aren't playing sports. So they're not being kept track of, whatever. Why? I don't even know what the term is, but so I heard on pretty good authority that a lot of the athletes went out to party on Labor Day weekend, only 3-day weekend of the semester. So that happened. As far as optimism that the semester goes on, I'm gonna be honest, like not much. Like I've kind of expected since honestly since I came here that we were gonna get sent home at some point. I just wanted to get out of my house and be here for as long as I could because. Sitting on the same living room for months and months and months, obviously, as I'm sure you know, I don't even have kids, thank God. So it's. Well,
Zevin, you're welcome once we get through this to come here anytime and take the kids after 6 months of them being around Kira and I. I think they would run screaming to your arms to get away from us. I want to ask you a little bit about your podcast, Good Take with Alex Hutton. How'd you start it? What have been some of the memorable shows that you've done?
It's a great question. So it's probably a few weeks left in the school year. We had been remote for a few weeks, and we were just Alex and I. Shout out Alex, by the way, if you're watching this. Alex and I were just FaceTiming one night, and we're just like, "There's nothing to do. I'm bored. You want to start a podcast? Sure." So we got into it. His brother taught us graphic design. It's actually really funny. Like we started it like as a hobby. It was obviously fun. Like you could argue that we've like always been destined to do a sports podcast together. We can finish each other's sentences, just talk sports like with the back of our hand. We started out for fun, didn't really anticipate we'd really get anybody. I mean, by our 10th episode, we had a run of Howard Beck, who was a former New York Times writer, Rob Parker, who has a national show on Fox Sports Radio, was the first black columnist. It's in the sports section at Newsday in Cincinnati. You get a national radio show, Fox Sports Radio. We also had Jason McIntyre, who has his own local radio show on Fox Sports Radio. We had Shea Serrano, who's a New York Times bestseller, has almost 300,000 Twitter followers. I mentioned Howard Beck earlier. He has almost 200,000 followers. So these are all guys we had in our 10th episode, in our first 10 episodes, just by tweeting like idiots and just by by like pestering and emailing. And it started out as just fun. It's quarantine. And so that's been really fun.
It's addictive, and it's to be able to say that you created something during a quarantine when so many people are just sitting around watching Netflix. I mean, it speaks volumes. Zevin, the future of journalism, because it is in the hands of you and your colleagues at Hofstra and some other universities. When you look up and you see where journalism is now, and what you're sort of looking at as you go into the business, what do you think?
Oh, I like how you made that nice and broad for me. It's a little soft toss. What do I think? I don't know. I think I'm both optimistic and pessimistic at the same time. I think I'm pessimistic at where things are, and I think I'm optimistic about where things could go. There's again, I don't need to go into a very long spiel, but like the political discourse and climate is just messed up. It's such a mess. So I think there's so many hypocrisies, so many whataboutisms. I could honestly name like 10 from the whole Kaepernick situation from like both sides of the aisle that are just ridiculous. And so I'm hoping that with my generation, since, we're perceived as, kind of real and woke and authentic, although the word woke is kind of, I'm not such a big fan of it anymore, but hopefully, there's a reason why someone like Joe Rogan is as popular as he is because at this point, there's so much access now that people can tell whether you're being authentic or not. And hopefully, in the long run, authenticity sells. And I think my generation's kind of gives the least amount of fucks of any generation. And they are just ideally going to be the most authentic because they just kind of grew up with, Snapchatting them, brushing their teeth, doing all these random things. So they're not as uptight, I think, as,
Well, I can tell you, Zevin, I mean, as somebody who's been in the business for 30 years, that authenticity actually does really matter. And I think that's been one of the raps against journalism is that journalism tries to pretend to be something it's not. And generally, people who are authentic and perhaps authentically credible are the ones who tend to break through. So, look, you've already learned that lesson. One more question I'm going to ask. Oh, go ahead.
I said, don't act like Jim Acosta is what I said.
Right, Jim Acosta. There's a rap against him is that for all the tough questions he asked Donald Trump, that he makes these exchanges about Jim Acosta as opposed to making it about the news or making it about the people who are suffering because of policies that instead of putting the attention on the news, he puts the attention on himself or uses Trump to put the attention on himself. And so Jim Acosta has fans, the CNN correspondent. He also has people, including myself, I've criticized him before for putting too much focus on himself. And it's also, I mean, one of the lessons, Evan, that I got many years ago is that there are two kind of journalists, right? There's the journalist who goes and covers a fire, assuming you're a TV journalist, or a radio journalist, you say, look at that fire over there. And here's how it started. And here's what the fire department is telling me. And here's how many people got hurt. And then you have the journalist who says, look at me. I'm standing in front of that fire. I'm brave. I can feel the heat. And you make it about yourself. Well, you don't want to be that second journalist. You want to be the first person who is going to the scene, who's reporting the news, reporting the facts, keeping the focus on the news, not drawing attention back to yourself. Unfortunately, in this sort of celebrity culture, it's harder and harder, I think, for journalists to get that distinction.
It's too tempting, I think. And, I think it's great that you pointed out. That's a really good analogy. And I've sort of long joked that, if I can get a woman to marry me who loves me as much as Jim Acosta loves Jim Acosta, then I'm going to be a really happy dude. So.
We're all going to get in a lot of trouble tonight, Zevin, but I love it. It's great. By the way, Alex Hutton says it's been great. So, Zevin, we are almost at 30 minutes. We're at 32 minutes. This has gone by very quickly, and I've managed not to bust your chops about things that I saw of you when you were very little, and you've managed not to bust my chops about things that you've seen of me. So maybe we should just end it here. What do you think?
I can go as long or as short as you want.
Well, let's do this, Zevin. Let's go another couple of minutes, and then I think we're going to do this again because this has been great. Let's try one more question here. Another one from Alicia. Well, actually, fantastic stream. Great to meet you here, Zevin Schuster. That's from Peter Bittner. Here's a question again from Alicia. With randomized testing at Hofstra, do you think they should test students weekly or more? Northeastern is testing every 5 days of students.
By chance, if you want to put it in the comments, do you know how many? Do you know what Northeastern's, or was it Northeastern or Northwestern, like what their population is? Because I'm maybe if they're more than us. I was just going to assume that because we have 10,000 to test everyone. I know there's commuters and stuff, but
I think Northeastern's probably about the same size as Hofstra.
So personally, like I have not been tested yet, so I'm going to assume no. I haven't heard of my friends being tested. I haven't, I've just heard that they're doing random testing, and that's pretty much it. I don't know what that entails or how often that means. And again, I know like if there's symptoms, people are supposed to report it. So look, who knows? I could have, someone may have had it and been asymptomatic. There's really no way to know. Again, it goes back to the drug analogy in Major League Baseball. Yeah.
Yeah, Zevin, can you see this comment from Beth Searle on your screen? It says, Z, I didn't know you were ever getting married.
I said if.
Zevin, we're going to leave it there. I'm just going to give you the shout out that we give to all of our guests. Zevin Schuster, he's a junior at Hofstra University. The Long Island Press Club gave him the first place award last summer for student journalism. He's the host of the podcast Good Take with Alex Hutton and Zevin Schuster. He reports for WRHU, writes for the Chronicle. Zevin, I'm proud of you. You're doing great. And journalism is in good hands, and broadcast journalism in particular is in good hands with you and some of your colleagues, and I'm really proud of you.
Thank you. I mean, it means a lot to hear you say that. And if you weren't gonna roast me for when I was little, I'll do it for you. Yes, people. He cleaned up my messy diapers way back when. So we'll talk about that on the next one.
Definitely. Zevin, thanks for doing this. This was great. Very informative, helpful information. So great for everybody who's worried about campuses like Hofstra. And good luck with classes the next couple of days. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.
And thanks to everybody at Haps and Quick Hits News for helping.